Alpine Chapel's Church Online. My name is Robin, and I'm so glad you're joining us here today. We believe that church isn't just a building, but it's a people, and that where 2 or 3 are gathered in His name, He is with you. So if you're in your living room, your kitchen, or even your bathroom, well, maybe not your bathroom, but everywhere else, God is with you today. And that's actually our prayer for you, that God meets you right where you are, that He meets you physically in the chaos or coziness of your home, but that He also meets you mentally and spiritually right where you are today. So as we get ready for this morning, prepare your hearts and minds for all that God has for you. We love you guys, we're praying for you, and we're so excited to see God move in your life today.
There is a light that burns in the darkness. There is a hope that washes the fear away. There is a peace that settles around us. It is your love that sets our hearts ablaze. Father, we're on our knees, with every heartbeat we bring you this offering. Oh Lord, come and fill this place. Father, we're crying out. Spirit, we need you now. Glorious love surrounds us. Oh Lord, come and fill this place. God, wherever we are today, we pray that you'd find us right here. We offer ourselves to you as we sing. There is a King that reigns in victory. There is a mercy strong enough to save. We feel it rising up from the ashes. There is a love that overcame the ground. Come on, if you believe it, lift it with all your heart today. There is a love that overcame the grave. Father, we're on our knees, with every heartbeat we bring you this offering. Lord, come and fill this place. Father, we're crying out. Spirit, we need you now. Glorious love surrounds us. Lord, come and fill this place. Lord, come and fill this place. Lord Jesus. I worship you. I worship you. I worship you. Oh, come on, no matter our surroundings, no matter our circumstance, and I will worship you. Oh, I worship you with all my heart. I worship you always. And I will worship you. I worship you. I worship you. With our whole self, we offer ourselves to you today, God. And I will worship you. I worship you. I worship you. Lord, come and fill this place. Father, we're crying out. The Spirit, we need you now. Glorious love surrounds. And now we worship you. I worship you. I worship you always. And I will worship you. I worship you. I worship you always. And I will worship you. I worship you. I worship you always. We sing, Jesus. And I will worship you. I worship you. I worship you always.
We say that we'll worship him always, regardless of our circumstance, regardless of the surroundings that we find ourselves in today. No matter if you find yourself in your living room, as Robin was saying in our opening video there, it doesn't matter where you find yourself. God is with you. He's present with you when you've gathered in his name. And the reason that we say that we're going to worship him always is because we know that we have a hope that is restored in us. And our hearts begin to move in that direction as we let him speak and give him space to inform our lives. And 2 Corinthians 4 says, all of this is for your benefit. And as God's grace reaches more and more people, there will be great thanksgiving and God will receive more and more glory. That is why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. Our hearts do not stay static, but they're always moving in one direction or the other. So we choose to put ourselves in this place where our spirits are becoming renewed and given new hope. Our spirits are renewed every day, for our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on the things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see, like the hope we have in Jesus, will last forever. Jesus, we believe that we have a hope that surpasses all circumstances, that is not dictated by our cultural moment, that's not dictated by our environment, but we can look into the future knowing that there's a greater good coming based on who you are, based on your word and your promise to us as your people. And so God, today as we understand that our hearts can move in one direction to the other, would you help us to put ourselves in a place where we move towards you, our hope. I have this hope as an anchor for my soul, and through every storm I will hold to you, and with endless love all my fear is swept away. Place our hope in him as we sing. There is hope in the promise of the cross. You gave everything to save the world you love. And this hope is an anchor for my soul. And our God will stand unshakable.
And this hope in the promise of the cross. You gave everything to save the world you love. And this hope is an anchor for my soul. And our God will stand unshakable.
All over this world, as people declare the hope they have in Him, we lift Him higher and higher. We sing,
Your name is higher, and your name is greater. Oh, my hope is in you. Your word unfailing, your promise unshaken. Oh, my hope is in you. Your name is higher, your name is greater. Oh, my hope is in you. Your word unfailing, your promise unshaken. Oh, my hope is in you. Your name is higher, your name is greater. Oh, my hope is in you. Your word unfailing, your promise unshaken. Oh, my hope is in you. Your name is higher, and your name is greater. Oh, my hope is in you. Your word unfailing, your promise unshaken. Oh, my hope is in you. Your name is higher, your name is greater. Oh, my hope is in you. Your word unfailing, your promise unshaken. Oh, my hope is in you. Let the king of my heart be the mountains where I run, the fountain I drink from, always my song. And let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, a ransom for my life, always my song. You are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you're never gonna let me down. Oh, you're never gonna let me down.
It's a promise we say.
Oh, you're never gonna
Come on, our God is the God of hope. Who'll never let us down. Who's always going to sustain us. Come on.
You're never gonna let me down.
Oh, we say, but you're never gonna let me down. Oh, yes, you're never gonna let me down. We believe that you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, so good.
You are good, you're good. You are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, so good. Oh, we know that you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. We say, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down.
God, it's your promise. It's your promise that we today we can stand on, we can hold to, knowing that you have each and every one of us, God. We don't have to strive for it. We don't have to earn it, God. It's given to us, God, your love. And we receive that today, God. And we stand on the promise that no matter what we face, that you'll never let us down. Even when it's confusing, even when we don't understand it, God, we choose to trust you in this moment today. It is in your name. All God's people said, amen.
What an incredible time of worship we just shared together. In just a moment, we are going to continue in our worship by giving. But first, we just want to say a special thanks to those of you who are joining us here for the very first time. If you're new to Alpine, we would love to actually just say hey, maybe connect with you, and even give you a small gift just to say thanks for watching. You can simply text ACLZ to 97000 or follow the instructions that your online host gives, and you will get a text back from us right here in service, and we'll get that gift sent out to you. If you're looking for an in-person gathering this summer, we want to invite you to our Wednesday night outdoor gatherings here at Alpine. These nights are filled with opportunities for community, games, and some of the best food trucks in the Chicago area. We take time to worship together and even hear a small challenge, all while sitting outside together by the lake. It's definitely a highlight of the week, so stop by Wednesdays from 6 to 8, and we hope to see you there. I want to take a minute and just say thanks to everyone who gives regularly here at Alpine. In fact, it's difficult to know exactly what you're giving to, especially in these times where we can't meet together physically, but let me encourage you in this moment. Your gifts are making a difference. Every week, we are able to meet the needs of hundreds of families within our community through our food pantry. We've been able to convert our property into a place of community by adding frisbee golf, volleyball, and this week, an outdoor basketball court. These are places for people to gather and enjoy community, but your gifts go even further than that. Your gifts help actual life change. They help people encounter hope, a hope that can change a person's life.
So I grew up Catholic, and I was always searching for a sense of belonging and community. I entered into a relationship that wasn't beneficial for me, a 10-year marriage that ended about 4 years ago. And at that time, in my time where I felt that I was most broken and was like I couldn't be saved, was a time when I walked into Alpine and found that it immediately felt like I belonged and I was where I needed to be. It was home for me, and my relationship with Christ has grown so much since I walked through those doors, and I found my sense of community, I found my sense of belonging, and I just feel so welcome here. Best part about my community is definitely Thrive, the single moms group here at Alpine. We support each other through thick and thin, and there's nothing like doing life with people who are walking along the same path as you and having that sense of hope and having people behind you that fully believe in you. That there's no tangible, you can't put anything on that. That is just something that I am so grateful for. And without those women, I don't think I'd be where I am today. Actually, both my boys had drive-through birthdays. They fell in March and May this year. So they had the fire department come with and all the Thrive moms and other members of Alpine. And I remember them all pulling up and just, it was in March. It was the end of March for Josh's birthday. And I cried. I literally cried because just to see the community rally around my son, who was just so sad that this wasn't going to be typical. This isn't what, his birthday had looked like for so many years. But then realizing that it doesn't need to look like that because you have those people that love you and back you, that are there for you on your special day, and there's nothing better than that. So as I began strengthening my relationship with Christ and dove more into what I could possibly do to give back, especially here at Alpine, I reached out to Donna and started volunteering for the food pantry. And I had done that during quarantine times, which, was a little bit scary to start off with, but as soon as I walked through those doors, all that fear just vanished. It was like, you are in the right place, you are doing the right thing, and you are helping people in the hardest time of their lives. And I'd received so much help in my hardest times of my life, to be able to turn around and give back to others in ways that they have helped me is an amazing gift to be able to have. So God meant for us to be in community. He didn't mean for us to isolate. And I know even though in times like these where it's necessary for medical purposes, there's still that great need for community and support. So through community and these groups for me, I have confidence again. I have a joy and happiness and a love for life. And I have a never-ending urge to just deepen my relationship with Christ even further than it is. And I never want that to stop. I never want to stop growing with my relationship with Christ and in my faith. And that is something that I project for the rest of my life here. It's just something I want to grow, and I want to give back to other women and people that have walked down my path. So,
Jessica, thank you so much for sharing your story. A story of what happens when you experience the hope of Jesus and share that hope with others.
Doing the kind of trend that's been going around. I don't know if it's Good morning. My name is Jeremy Pettitt. I am a professor at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. I teach communications and actually think and write about communication and culture. And lately, I've been looking around and watching how people are engaging, and something started to concern me about how we're communicating. And so I started to think through, what is it that's really throwing me off and why? And the answer came to me when I read and got really clear about a passage in James chapter 1. In James 1:19, James, a disciple of Jesus, says, "My brothers and sisters," now this is interesting because he's saying it to everyone who's Christian. Not just to the men in the room, not just to the women in the room, to everyone. Take note. You should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. And I looked around at all the interactions that I was seeing in the world around me, both personally and online and in other spaces, and I started to realize that we're actually got that flipped quite a bit. We are quick to speak and slow to listen, but we did get the fast to be angry part. Why? Because I think deep down we've failed to realize the power of listening to one another. Now, it doesn't help that a lot of our technology, which I study, tends to favor people talking. So, almost all of your social media posts start with you saying something. Okay, but where are we listening? Because then, how do we respond? We don't often respond by asking questions. We respond by inserting our opinion as well in the comments. So everyone's talking. Almost everyone's talking, and how many people are actually listening? What would that look like to listen? So this morning, I'm actually just going to walk through a series of questions about listening from a communication professor to you. And some of them will be reminders for a good majority of you. So just think of the questions as though you were asking for a friend. What are the 4 questions I want to talk through this morning? First one is, what is listening really? Second one is thinking through, why is it so hard to listen to people? Third question that we're going to wrestle with, why would I listen to people altogether? What's the point? And the last question is, how do I get better at it if I'm supposed to listen? So the first question, what is listening, is actually pretty fascinating discussion, because what we think of as listening is often, from a communication perspective, only defined as hearing. And there's a big difference between hearing and listening. What do I mean? Right now, if you're listening to me, you have to have first heard the sound of my voice. Hearing is actually a physical thing that happens. A sound enters your ear and is processed as a signal to your brain. That's hearing. We hear stuff all the time. But how much do we actually listen? So what's the difference between hearing and listening? Simple. Listening requires your mind, not just your ears. Listening is about your mind and what your mind is doing, and it's an activity that your mind does, not simply a thing that happens to your ears. Jesus knows this. Jesus is telling a story in Matthew chapter 13. And in Matthew 13, he's telling the story of the parable of the sower. And he tells this story, this parable, and when he finishes, he says this famous phrase that he's famous for because he says it lots and lots of times. To the one who has ears, let him hear. Which kind of sounds like a duh moment, right? Well, duh, if you have ears, hear. That's not really what he's saying, because if you look down a few verses later, he references a a verse from Isaiah that says, because if they really heard with their ears and understood what I was saying, then they would change. So hearing is different than listening because listening is about understanding. It requires effort. And I'll get to that in a minute, but here's what I want you to hear. Listening is not something that happens automatically. You've been hearing things your whole life, so you just think, well, this is just a normal activity. It just happens. You're hearing things all around you all the time, and you think that that's listening. You may be sitting outside at some point during all of this quarantine, and you've heard birds for the first time. Some of you, yes? No? Just never heard a bird? Never. But did you actually listen to the birds? What are they actually trying to communicate? Oh, wait, they're actually saying something. They're not just making noise as a background that's annoying while I'm trying to read a book outside. They're trying to do something that I understand the meaning. And that's the difference between listening and hearing, is that listening is about finding meaning. Okay? So that's what listening is. Well, then why is it so hard? I'll illustrate. I actually want you to understand that listening has 4 really powerful difficulties, things that are working against you as you listen. And here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to listen to me and see if you can figure out which one's the worst one for me. The first one is this. Listening actually has to deal with the fact that we are, as human beings, we're structured in a way that we have the capacity, as you're listening to my voice right now, to understand more words than the person's saying. So we call this information load. How much information can a brain take in? And so here's what happens. In an average conversation, a human speaks between 125 and 150 words a minute. The problem with the information load, often for most of us, as you're listening to my voice and I'm talking a little faster, getting to the 150 mark, is that your brain can actually understand somewhere between 400 and 600 words a minute. You can do almost triple what you can say. So what happens? Because of that variance of information load, we wind up with a problem because my brain is thinking of other things while you're talking. And it starts wandering off and doing other stuff. And then sometimes it kind of forgets to come back and listen to you again. Oh, yeah, wait, you were talking. Oh, shoot, I need to pay attention. You said something about that, now I'm thinking about lunch, and now I'm off in another place, and now the information load, the gap, means that I lack the capacity often to stay with you. Why? Because this is difficult. Listening is hard, and it's like a muscle that you have to exercise and use to actually listen well. It's not something normal that you're just going to get to. And I'll talk through later, how do we help that? The second one is probably the most powerful. The second one is noise. Now, when I say noise, naturally, most of you are thinking about, okay, so you're talking about that baby crying on the airplane that makes it really hard to fall asleep. You're talking about the construction that's happening down the road for me. You're talking about all of the noise that's going on around me. And yes, I am, that's difficult. Because if you're watching this online right now, you may be experiencing some other kinds of noise, some external kinds of noise, like if there's a lag in your internet and my voice is going, which, by the way, I'm doing that. Don't worry, your internet's not broken. That's external noise. But that's not the most difficult one. See, in communications, there's another concept called internal noise. And internal noise is actually much more difficult to overcome. Internal noise can be things like, I have a body, and when that body's in pain, it's hard to listen. You know, you stubbed your toe, and it feels like it's going to fall off your body, and then someone wants to talk to you, and you're like, I can't talk to you right now because I can't hear anything except my toe throbbing. You may be sitting there watching me online, and all of a sudden you realized, I I shouldn't have drank 3 cups of coffee before I started watching this. Because you have to go to the bathroom. When you have to go to the bathroom, you don't listen to people. When you're hungry, you don't listen to people. Your body creates noise. And all of a sudden, I'm not paying attention to you because all I can think about is, I have to eat something right now. I'm so thirsty. Second kind of noise that gets in our way is that we have grown up in primary relationships with people. And those people often sit like little voices in the back of our heads, like the 2 old guys from the Muppets just making little comments here and there. You know what I'm talking about? Your mom, your dad. You shouldn't eat that. You need to go to bed. What are you doing? That's not a good idea. Ooh, I like that. Good job. Yay. Your boss. You know what? You need to get up for work tomorrow. Whatever those primary relationships are in your life, your brother, your sister, your grandma, whoever it is, you're hearing little voices in the back of your head. But the last one's actually the most difficult. And I'm going to tell you a secret, and you don't have to tell anybody. Just you can admit like it was for your friend, not for you. We all talk to ourselves. You do. I do. I do a lot. You do. You talk to yourself. This becomes problematic when you're trying to listen to someone and you're talking to yourself internally. Because now you're listening to multiple people. I don't mean you're crazy. That's normal. We have conversations with ourselves and say, I don't think this is a good idea. Or, you know what, I got to go to bed, or I got to take care of something. All of that internal dialogue is normal. And psychologists actually spend a lot of time trying to think through with you, what are you saying to yourself, and is it true? This self-talking can be extremely helpful, can be extremely damaging. But I'm here to tell you, no matter what, it's usually distracting. So here's what happens. In one of my classes, I actually try and illustrate this for my students. And if it were non-COVID, I would put a whole bunch of people up here on the stage and show you, because it gets really, really fun and really loud. But let me just describe it to you. I take 2 students and actually set them on either side, and I say, just have a conversation. Just start talking to one another. And they do, because inevitably college students find something to talk about very quickly. And then I pause them after about 30 seconds. And I ask 2 other people of the same gender to come and stand in front of them. And I say, now you're your internal voice, your internal self-talk. Just talk to them about whatever's going to happen next in their day. And so they do. And they start hearing the voice, and they, okay, now I'm competing. And then I ask another student to come up, and I ask them to stand in between the 2 of them and actually just make construction noises, which is awesome. I get the craziest kid in the class to just get up and act like all the construction machines. And now I have them talk again. It's getting louder. Then I ask 4 or 5 more people to stand up behind them and be those other voices and whisper in their ear and talk again. It's getting louder. And now they're like, oh my gosh, it's getting louder. And by this time, if you have sensory issues, I usually just send you out of the room because it's getting really loud. And I say, all right, but we're not done. Everyone else left in the room has to come up and run back and forth in between these 2 people, because now they're spread out, and make all the sounds that all of your wonderful technology that's sitting in your pocket makes. All of your emails and notifications and text messages and all that stuff. You've got mail. Run back and forth and make those noises. And by the time they're done, these 2 people cannot hear, let alone listen to one another. And they say, I didn't realize how much noise was in my world. And inevitably, the fascinating part to me is that within the next couple of classes, they come back to class and say, I went to lunch with one of my friends, and I realized how much internal noise was happening, how much I was distracted, how much I was talking to myself, how much I heard all those other primary relationships speaking in the back of my head, and I noticed it, and it was extremely distracting. And I said, yeah, it is. And so the way that I finish that class is that I gradually remove each one of them until we're down to just the 2 people talking and their self-talk. And tell them, wouldn't this be easier? Isn't this a better way to listen? The third thing in noise, which is actually maybe the more dangerous, if not the most difficult, it's called selective listening or selectivity. We listen for what we want to hear. We listen for things that confirm what we already think. We listen so that we can put people in categories and boxes and say, okay, this is you, this is you, this is you. Solve the problem. I'm done. Yay! Everything's been packaged in perfect, neat little bows. And yet, in the process, I haven't really listened to you, have I? In fact, I've done something really dangerous and scary to me as a communication person. I've reduced you. Well, I don't know if I do that. Okay, let's ask ourselves a question. How often have you said these two words? Well, that's just those two words, well, she's just a girl. He's just a boy. She's just young. Well, they're just old. They're just Anglo, African American, Hispanic, Asian. They're just young. They're just rich. They're just poor. They're just. And every single time I say you're just, I shrink you. I make you less. I don't make you the creation that God made in his image that is fallen and broken and desperately in need of love, who lives in this particular time and place with this particular cultural background, with all these things that make me a robust person. And I just took you and made you a tiny little sliver of that. That reduction is dangerous. You're just a crazy old person talking on Facebook. Hear it? Why is this dangerous? Because it allows me to take the people in my life and control them in ways that do not allow them to be the humans that God made. This is dangerous work. So every time you hear yourself say I would challenge you to pause and say, is this true? Or do I need to slow down a little bit and not confirm my bias and not rush to judgment and not take all the things that I think are true and just insert them in the situation and I'm done? But actually slow down and say, this is a person who's in front of me that desperately needs me to hear them, to listen to them, and to understand them. Because the last part, and the reason this is the most difficult, is one that we as Christians would argue on a regular basis, is that we are broken. We are fallen and broken people, sinful people, selfish people. That's a real hindrance if you're going to try and listen to other people. We're broken. We're incredibly capable at sometimes of just simply ignoring other people because what they're saying is something we don't want to hear. Which, by the way, worked out really well for the people that Noah was talking to. They just ignored him and the whole world went underwater. We're also, at other times, incredibly capable of pseudo-listening. That means we look like we're listening, but we're not there. We're gone. We're somewhere else. Oh, sure. What did I just say? I have no idea. And all of you are looking at your spouses. Don't do that. I didn't mean that. We have a tremendous capacity at times to listen, sort, and move on. Sometimes we listen just for ammo. I'm just listening to all the things you're saying and lining up all my ammo so that I can argue with you and win the argument and be done with this conversation. You like that? Does it feel good? No. But the truth is that in all of these moments, we're still wrestling with the same story. The story is that it's all about you and it's all about me. It's all about me. Isn't that really ultimately what the story in Genesis 3 is about? Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden, and God says, you can eat of every tree but this tree. Don't eat this tree. Now, the question is, did they listen? Well, you could say that they heard him because later in Genesis 3, when the devil comes to talk to him, they actually repeat to some degree with a little addition. We're not supposed to eat this tree. Oh, and by the way, we're not supposed to touch it, which is, by the way, what Eve says, which makes me think Adam just added, okay, just don't touch it, okay? They listened enough to hear the words, but not understand what was really going on. Because the moment that the devil tells them a different story, they listened to the story that they liked and did what he said. They listened to his story because it gave them what they wanted. They're fallen and broken people. Well, if we're just listening to fallen and broken people all the time, why would we even want to listen at all? Why would we do that? Why listen? Now, as a person who studies communication and culture, one of the things that I recognize is that often we would say, well, not everybody believes what I believe. And here's what I would say back to you. Almost every single religion in the world has some form of the golden rule. You know the golden rule, do to others what you would have them do to you. Some of the variations are do not do to others what you would not have them do to you. But for people who study culture, this is the foundation. The golden rule is the foundation for all civil society and discourse. If everybody who is going to post on social media just asked the question, would I want this done to me? So should I do it to someone else? You would have the foundation for a civil society, for people who would actually dialogue and engage with one another and have meaningful conversation. But Jesus didn't stop there, as he always does. He pushes further. In a conversation with the Pharisees say, what's the greatest commandment? You all know the story. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And the second is actually like it. And when we say that words in that verse, it actually means the second is the same. Love your neighbor as yourself. His disciple John in 1 John says, you cannot say that you love God, who you have not seen, if you haven't loved your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I'm going to say this, and if you only hear one thing I say this whole morning, I just want you to hear this, because it might make some of you angry as you're listening to it. You cannot truly love your neighbor unless you listen to them. I'll say it again. You cannot truly love your neighbor unless you listen to them. You say, well, what if my neighbor doesn't speak? You're still working toward understanding and they're still trying to communicate. You're listening even if you're not hearing. You cannot truly love your neighbor unless you listen to them. What would that look like? Let me tell you a story. During this quarantine, I had the honor and the privilege. A pastor friend of mine that I went to college with invited me to join an online small group. A group of guys I knew one of them. There's a whole bunch of people I didn't know. And I've never met them in real life. I've only met them online. And we had lots of good conversation, and we would tell jokes and pray and have serious conversation, have fun conversation, and we're all over the map. We had a great time. It's about an hour and a half every Sunday night. And one Sunday, before we're getting there, somebody texts and says, tonight I want to talk about a conspiracy theory. And I went, oh boy. They want to talk about flat earth. And I was like, okay. Not sure I'm going to be able to go with you on this one. But I'm actually going to make an effort to listen. So I actually sat down for about 30 minutes and did some research. What is this flat earth theory? Why do people think it? What's going on? We got to the conversation that night, and he finally brought it up. I want to talk about this. And as he starts talking about it, I started asking him some questions that showed him very quickly that I had actually done some reading to find out what he actually was thinking. And as he began to unpack it, the first thing I experienced was he was a little shocked that somebody wasn't just mocking him. And so we started unpacking each one of the things that he thought about it and asked clarifying questions and talked to him about it and said, what does this look like and why would you think this? And you know what I found out? His family had moved here from another country. And in that country, their government had regularly lied to them, used propaganda and technology to convince them of things that weren't true. He wasn't sure, truthfully, if he even believed flat earth theory. But what he was sure of is that he actually wasn't sure that he trusted authority and whether that authority was telling him things that were true. And that turned the conversation in a completely different direction. One that actually allowed us to have conversations that were deep and meaningful. By the end of it, he said he felt heard. He said, this was a really good conversation. And I don't normally get to talk to people about this because I'm a Christian and I don't really want to bring this up because people, just make fun of me and toss it out. We had a deep conversation about the fact that he had a hard time with authority, and I empathize. There's moments where I look at authority and think, I'm not sure these people are telling me the truth. I'm not sure this is good. But in that moment, he felt heard, and something started to change. And he said, this might have been one of the best conversations I've had in a long time. This was a gift. Thank you. Why? Because instead of being quick to speak, quick to get angry, quick to be dismissive, it just took a little time, not a lot, a little time to listen and get past all of the stuff that's on the surface and get to what we were really supposed to be talking about. It required me to listen to get there, though. So, okay, I'm supposed to listen. It's difficult. How do I get better? If it's a skill, how can I get better? Let me give you 3 things you can do to be a better listener. They're not that hard. Well, they're not that hard to say. Sometimes they're hard to do. The first one is pay attention. Focus. This one can be incredibly difficult. Why? Because it usually requires you to look the person in the eye. Look at them. While they're talking to you, look at them. Eliminate some of the distractions if you're going to pay attention. Eliminate some of those things because you're going to pay attention. Eliminate the external noise as much as you can. Some of you are like, yeah, but what about that internal noise? That sounds tough. I said that there was a variance in which the person talking was talking slower than you could understand, or you could understand faster than that. You can process it. So use that processing time to your advantage. Look at the person and actually check their nonverbals. Look at their body language. Look at the way their face is moving. Are they smiling? Are they frowning? Use all that information that's coming at you. Use that processing power to pay attention to it. And listen for their feelings, not just for what they said. Listen for their feelings. And then recognize that as you're doing that, you're probably going to, and this is okay, start summarizing what they're saying. Like, okay, so it sounds like they're having this discussion about this. Is that true? Is that actually what's happening here? Is this what they're talking about? Whatever you do with that internal noise, simply recognize this. I'm challenging you to continue to make it about them. If you need to visualize the information and say, you're in a story and now I'm visualizing the story with you and I'm staying there and wait. How long were you there? What did they look like? How many people? Which is the second point. Ask questions. A good conversation means you ask clarifying questions. Wait, where were you? Wait, how old were you when this happened? You can even start to paraphrase things tentatively. It sounds like that was hard. Now, don't parrot. Why? Because if the person says, I'm angry, and you say, you're angry? They're going to be like, I just said I was angry. If you wanted a parrot, you'd have bought one already. Paraphrase. Show them that you're listening. Show them that you start to understand by asking those clarifying questions and say, this is what I'm hearing. And be responsive. Total silence just drives people crazy because at that point they're like, you checked out. Like, sure, yeah. Add some encouraging things in there to keep them talking. Clarify what's going on. Even paraphrase it tentatively. But by tentatively, I mean don't assume that you understood it just because they said it. Actually say, sounds like you're getting frustrated. Last thing, communicate your understanding. What you understand, communicate that back to them. Summarize their thoughts. So you're basically at this point trying to wrestle through what it means to buy a new car or deal with this particular relationship or figure out that's really where we're going. And right now you're feeling like this, and this. Is that accurate? Yeah. Reflect back their feelings. It sounds frustrated. Can you just give me a second? I got to have a little side tangent. This is a rant that I go on all the time with my students, and I just need to say it. As a communications professor, it drives me crazy when people misunderstand the difference between a thought and a feeling. Because feelings are just emotions, and they're hard to argue with. Thoughts are a different thing altogether, and we can disagree with people's thoughts. Why is this a problem? Because I hear regularly people say things like this. They say, I feel like that person's an idiot. That's not a feeling. You could say, I feel sad that that person's an idiot. That's a feeling. But I don't feel that person's an idiot. I think that person's an idiot, and I can argue or disagree with a thought. Why is that important? Because if I say I feel that person's an idiot and say I disagree, they say, well, that's just how I feel. No, it's not. That's what you think. Clear thinking about how you communicate actually changes the way we listen and understand things. So when you say, I feel like, it should be followed by a feeling. If you're like, I don't know what feelings are then, go Google them. List of feelings. Sad, happy, confused, frustrated. Wonderful. Feelings. Happy. Joy, good, feelings, not thoughts. Just a little quick. Guys, you've mostly probably been taught about your feelings as if they were that little tiny box of crayons that had 8 colors in it. You're probably going to have a conversation with a female in your life who is wonderful, who was given the 1054 box of crayons and has colors you've never heard of and has no idea why you can't think of something bigger than angry, sad, happy. That's all I got. You don't get down. You don't have mauve and fuchsia and all these other wonderful colors you've never even heard of. And you're like, I don't know what that means. So you're sad. No, I'm not sad. I'm frustrated. What's different? It's a little tiny variation that has a lot of meaning to the people that know what the words mean. Clearly communicate your thoughts and feelings. And then the last part of communicating understanding is that you respond in love. You respond in love to the people around you. And some of you are saying, well, that means I have to agree with them. No, it doesn't. I didn't agree with the guy who was talking about flat earth theory. Didn't agree with him. Just because I listen to someone does not mean I have to agree with them. It means I'm trying to understand them as a person because that's the goal of listening. If you're going to listen well, just know this. It's going to be work. But it's really, truly going to be worth it. I'll tell you one final story as I close this morning. I served as an executive at Awana. Some of you know that. And a new addition to the board of directors several years ago was a very prominent, very well-known Christian executive that built one of the biggest global ministries in the world. In fact, I could probably argue that this person, some of you are giving him his ministry monthly money on a regular basis. And just so happened that they had a dinner, and he sat down, and I saw a chair open next to him, and I went, I'm sitting and talking to that guy. I've got a ton of questions. So I sat down next to him. He welcomed me and learned my name. And I asked the first question, and ever so skillfully, like a communicator that just is savvy and brilliant at what he's doing, he quickly answered my question and turned it back into, so tell me your story. I thought, all right, I've got a lot of questions, so I'm going to give him the 2-minute version of my story so that I can move on and get to my questions because I have this opportunity. Because I thought that what would prove me important was talking and showing that I was intelligent, that I was capable. So I started telling the story, and I just told it quick. And ever so slightly, as he was listening, he wouldn't let me go fast. Wait. So were your parents from there? And where was that? What was it like? Tell me about your house. And he slowed me down. All right, so I'm going to tell the 10-minute version. Okay, so I'm going to tell a 10-minute version of my story, and I'll still get to my questions. See, because I'm internally self-talking and dialoguing as I'm listening, or trying to, but he's got me talking. And he just kept asking questions. That sounds really interesting. That must have been really hard. Oh, it's so good when those kind of moments happen. And now I'm in the 20-minute version of my story. And I'm like, okay, how long can I keep talking? Like, this isn't good. I'm still talking. I want to hear this guy. He got me 40 minutes. I've never told my story for 40 minutes. But at the end of it, he did something. I realized something in that moment. That this man had really, truly heard me. He had listened so deeply that I felt loved. And I thought, why do you love me? Like, I'm just some guy you met sitting down at a dinner. And he truly, honestly believed that to love your neighbor is to listen to them, to ask them questions, to pay attention. I had his undivided attention for almost an hour, and he still answered some of my questions, but the most valuable gift that he gave me that night was the gift of being heard, understood, and loved. So I'm going to close with 2 questions, 2 challenges for you this week on listening. As you've heard me answer all these questions. If, by the way, some of you are going to say, well, you know what, that was really good. I don't remember all the stuff you just said. And you say, okay, I can watch it online, but I don't know that I want to send it to my mom because she's not a Christian. I just posted a video, jeremypettitt.com, my website, that's a 7-minute version of this. If you want to share it with somebody else and start a conversation with them by saying, here's some things I'm trying to work on. This guy said this. I want to talk about this, but I don't know how to start the conversation. Just send them the video and say, let's talk about this. First challenge. If you read the scriptures on a regular basis during the week, can I just ask you this week to pick a gospel and go back through the life of Jesus and look at how Jesus listened to people? You want to know how to listen to people well? Go back to the man. Jesus will show you every single time how to do it better than anybody else you've ever met. And by the way, if it was just important to be the one talking, if you're the Son of God and the words that you spoke brought the universe into existence, why did you, the most important person in the universe, spend so much time listening to people? Go back and read the Gospels. Pick one. Don't know what to do? Go to Luke. Read Luke and watch how Jesus engages with people and asks them questions and listens, really, truly listens to them. And as you're doing that, listen for the Holy Spirit. Allow the Holy Spirit to bring those things out and strike a chord in your heart from the scriptures. Second challenge is this. Who's the one person, the one neighbor that you might need to spend some time loving by listening to them this week? Who is that? And don't have the conversation on social media. If you need to have it over Zoom because you have some issues with what's going on in the world, fine, I get it. But actually listen to them. Who's that person that you need to love this week as Jesus called you to love your neighbor by listening to them? Let's pray. Jesus, thank you so much for this day. Thank you that you came, you, the Son of God, came here and listened to us and heard our hearts and heard our ideas, but also heard our feelings. Heard all the things that were going on in our internal lives as well as our external lives. And understood. You understood because you were there in the dirt with us. You were there eating with us and drinking and hanging out and spending time and sleeping. You did all the things that we did. You walked in our shoes so that you would understand when we say something is difficult or when we say something is joyous. You would know what that meant. And we know that you know what it meant. Teach us to listen to one another as you have called us. that in the end we may be like you. We pray all these things in your name. Amen. Thank you.
Today, we hope that you've had an incredible morning. We want you to know we are praying for you as you share hope this week and as you listen to those around you. Have a great week.